Desperate to find some sort of financial success at the box office, Disney reached deep into its bag of IPs looking for a big-name franchise to capitalize on. They knew they needed something with instant brand recognition, a big star, and a fan base whose goodwill they haven't already completely squandered. And at the bottom of that satchel, they found a brittle, dusty old artifact by the name of Indiana Jones. A very popular series of films from the 80s, these fun, light-hearted adventure films follow the exploits of the titular character, an iconic hero who has faced down every kind of danger imaginable in 4 previous films, taking on both the Nazis and the commies in pursuit of knowledge and preventing evil from exploiting important artifacts. And Disney's new plan to turn this franchise into a shameless cash grab was obvious.
And you, a final triumph! Indiana Jones, out with a bang, back in the saddle! I'm not selling this, am I?
This new 5th installment of the Indiana Jones series is called The Dial of Destiny, which is ironic given that this movie is destined to fail. It's almost designed to fail when you let the production budget reach nearly $300 million, a number that doesn't account for the near equal marketing budget. On that kind of budget, Indiana Jones and The Dial of Destiny needs to pull in $750 million at the box office to break even, and realistically, Disney won't be happy with anything under $1 billion. And with all of those astronomical figures in mind, do you know what the projected opening weekend box office for Indiana Jones is? A mere $65 million domestically. And when you typically make the biggest chunk of your box office take on the first weekend, that is not a good sign. But we'll talk more about Kathleen Kennedy and this problem she's created later in the video. Now, who are they counting on to bring this film to the promised land of profitability? Harrison Ford's shambling 80-year-old ass and this award-winning nobody. To be fair, Harrison Ford actually does pretty well for his age, and he even turned in a few gut-wrenching emotional scenes that were new for the character. But each and every one of these moments gets completely buried by his insufferable counterpart Helena, Indy's goddaughter played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. This character is an obnoxious, self-serving, heartless, smug, annoying, cruel, backstabbing piece of shit know-it-all without a single redeeming quality. She's well and truly deserving of every curse word there is. They all fit her to a T. Her presence alone drops this film at least 2 or 3 points on a scale of 10. She's that bad. The actress presumably played the role fine, but it's just an absurdly awful, unlikable character. The type of character you rarely find in the wild, but almost always find in Kathleen Kennedy's recent projects. But we'll revisit the goddaughter who puts the hell in Helena later, trust me. For now, let's recap the story for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Spoilers ahead. The movie begins with a flashback featuring a de-aged Indiana Jones toward the end of the Second World War, as he's captured by Nazis because we hate Nazis again in 2023. In typical Indy fashion, he easily escapes both his captors and certain death multiple times, and the head Nazi scientist pursuing him dies when he takes a metal pipe to the face, going at least 60 miles per hour on a train. Indy makes off with the Antikythera, an ancient dial developed by the mathematician Archimedes that, when combined with the second half, allows you to detect fissures in time and travel to the past. Yay, more time travel. Fast forward to the present day, 1969, and we find that Indiana Jones is an old curmudgeon, miserable and alone with only his hobby of alcoholism keeping his life together. On his day of retirement, his goddaughter Helena tracks him down and annoys the bejesus out of him before roping him into her scheme to find the second half of the dial. Indy shows her he still has his half of the dial, but then some Nazi agents show up to take it. Helena, being the caring goddaughter that she is, runs away and locks the door behind her, leaving Indy to get captured by murderous Nazis. Helena gets away, and then we get some casual racism from this character.
Trigger, happy cracker.
Indiana escapes through a parade, and we learn that the Nazis are working for a Nazi, the same one who somehow survived taking a metal pipe to the face at 60 miles per hour without so much as a scar, because these movies are written by children. Indy is framed and now wanted for murder, but it's a good time to skip town anyway to recover the dial, so he has his old friend Sala take him to the airport where he heads to Tangier. There he finds Helena trying to auction off his half of the dial, which she stole from Indy, and when he shows up to recover it, she just continues on trying to sell the property she stole from her godfather. Then the Nazis show up a few moments later, and the goddaughter from hell escalates the situation until guns are drawn and pointed at Indy. And what does she do to defuse the situation? Not a damn thing. In fact, she steals the dial from him a second time and tosses it to her short round knockoff named Teddy. This leads to a big chase scene throughout the city between Indiana Jones, his see you next Tuesday of a goddaughter Helena, the Nazis, and some local crime boss whose heart Helena broke, because we the audience need to know that this woman is a player, just like Indiana Jones used to be, because those two things are totally the same. The Nazis escape with the dial, and in the meantime, Helena blames Indy for not being there for her as a father figure? What? He's not your father, lady.
I mean, what even is a godfather? Anyway, family never was your strong suit.
Hey, at least she asked. I think she legitimately doesn't understand what a godfather is. I've seen girls with daddy issues before, but godfather issues is a new one. Anyway, Indy, Helena, and Teddy, whose character is basically a mix between Short Round from Temple of Doom and the monkey from Raiders, meet up with Antonio Banderas' character, a master diver with a boat who can take them to where the next MacGuffin is waiting, under the sea. They set sail and we learn that Mutt, Indy's son played by Shia LaBeouf in the last movie, enlisted in the military and died, and his death drove Indy and Marion apart. Indy spills his guts, and all Helena can do is sit there, mouth breathing and staring at him with her eyes glazed over. In the next scene, she's up early in the morning drinking and sexually objectifying one of the sailors. They dive below the waters and recover the guide to the location of the other half of the dial, but they return to the surface to find the Nazis have arrived. The Nazis interrogate them and murder Antonio Banderas. Then Helena tells the Nazis exactly what the artifact says before enacting a surprise escape plan that involves using dynamite to blow up half the ship. She and Indy and Teddy escape on the Nazis' boat, and Helena is giddy as a schoolgirl before Indiana Jones has to remind her of what just happened.
My friend was just murdered.
Sorry.
My God, you're just hoping that this chick puts on a Nazi uniform so Indy can punch her lights out. Everyone ends up in Sicily, where Helena and Indy go to some cave to find Archimedes' tomb, where they find him buried and the other half of his dial, and some modern technology, which is puzzling, but not puzzling for anyone who's seen any of the 84 time travel movies from the last decade. The Nazis track them down, shoot Indiana Jones in the chest, take him hostage, and escape with the dial, hell-bent on traveling back in time and killing Hitler so a more competent leader can take his place. They travel through the time portal with Helena and Teddy in pursuit, but accidentally wind up 2,000 years in the past at the Siege of Syracuse, the very battle that led to Archimedes destroying his dial and separating the pieces in the first place. Everyone fights aboard this old plane flying over this ancient battle for a while, and eventually Indy and Helena escape as the plane goes down, killing them Nazis. The pair have a chance encounter with Archimedes, and Indiana Jones, wounded, dying, and finally getting to see the actual history he's been chasing for 2 generations, and with nothing to go back to, decides he wants to stay in this time. He makes several heartfelt, gut-wrenching pleas with Helena to go on home and leave him here. And what does she do?
Helena, get on the plane. I need to do this.
Me too.
She knocks him unconscious and drags him back to their time without his consent. She suddenly acts like she cares about him after spending the entire movie stealing from him, leaving him to the Nazis, and getting his friend killed, all the while blaming him for not being around for her like a father. He wakes up in the present day and is reunited with Marion, and he grabs his hat one last time, and who cares, and the movie's done. Wow, what a slap to the face to Indiana Jones's character. Well, more like a punch. And they really saved their biggest punch for the end with this one. This movie is possibly the worst of the series. It's at least on par with Crystal Skull, but the problems of those two movies are wildly different. Where the Crystal Skull was just chock full of stupid things, Dial of Destiny features 2 main characters that no one wants to see, a broken old hero and an unlikable asshole. The movie featured all the familiar tomb raiding and escape sequences typical of an Indiana Jones movie, and actually succeeded in adding some positive dimensionality to the main character, but it's just totally derailed by several huge problems. Now, the deepfake / de-aging at the beginning of the film was decent, but while there were some good moments, there were some real bad moments too. And they made the odd decision to leave the de-aged version with the voice of a 79-year-old. I mean, I can watch an AI-generated Trump and Biden debate the size of the former president's genitals, but Disney won't shell out to sharpen up Indiana Jones's voice? Then there's other little things that the movie just seems to forget about. Everyone just forgot about Indy being wanted for murder. Everyone just forgot about the open bullet wound in his chest he's had for an hour. Everyone just forgot that the Nazi doctor's head got taken off in 1945. The movie is 30 minutes too long, like seemingly every movie is these days, and it gets pretty boring at times. And even though people didn't like the character at the time, having Mutt die without making him a bigger part of Indy's life on screen is shitty. That was Indiana Jones's only son, his natural successor, his legacy. But who are we kidding? This movie shits all over his legacy. Now, there were some positives with Dial of Destiny, but they all centered on the power of nostalgia. Seeing Solo was nice, as was Indy reuniting with Marion. And admittedly, there are some terrific little references to the previous films. But all of the good moments crumple under the unbearable weight of a massive see you next Tuesday. Helena is the goddaughter from hell. You'd be better off taking your chances with the little girl from The Orphan being your goddaughter than with Helena. It can't be overstated how viscerally unlikable this character is. Every time she opens her mouth, well, that's not fair, because her mouth is always hanging open like a fish. Every time she speaks, you're just left sitting there thinking, what the fuck is wrong with this woman? She spends the entire movie fucking over her godfather and is never redeemed. She has a random change of heart at the end of the movie out of nowhere and suddenly starts caring, and it feels incredibly out of place because it's not some human character development she went through. It just feels like a robot flipping a switch. Indiana Jones is the only person that keeps believing she's a good person deep down, but there's not a shred of evidence of that in the film. When she wasn't being an obnoxious mouth breather, she was sexually objectifying men at random. Which I'm fine with, by the way, but not from people who complain about men doing the same thing. You can't chastise a behavior one day and then engage in that behavior in the name of equality the next. And I can't get over what an absolute asshole they made her look like in this scene where she's laughing while Indiana Jones is processing seeing his longtime friend get murdered right in front of him.
My friend was just murdered.
Sorry.
Indy's friend, who risked life and limb to help her and Indy find what they were seeking, asking nothing in return, is killed because of her pursuit of wealth and fame, and him getting murdered doesn't even register in her mind. Then when Indy confronts her with this reality, she drops a one-word apology and just moves on. She's a complete sociopath, and yet the movie expects us to like this character eventually. And I wish it was more complicated than this, but she's just another fake strong female character produced by the supposed feminist Kathleen Kennedy. I'm convinced that no one in Hollywood who's making these strong female characters has ever met a likable woman in real life. They, at a minimum, have so few good women in their lives that they can't write one into a script. It's sad, and it's antithetical to their goal of creating actually strong female characters. But like a Terminator T-1000 sent back to take out its target, you start to realize that Helena's character is just here to trample all over Indiana Jones's character and legacy. The Indiana Jones we meet in Dial of Destiny is a broken man. He has a drinking problem, his marriage has gone to shit, and he seemingly has nothing left to live for. It's not the Indiana Jones we're used to, and it's certainly not the Indiana Jones we last saw in Crystal Skull. And while it's not quite to the extreme of the destruction of Luke Skywalker's character in The Last Jedi, it's not a state that fans want to see their longtime hero in. It's depressing, and at this point, it's entirely unoriginal. And no scene better typifies the absolute disrespect for Indy's legacy this movie has than the penultimate scene. Indiana Jones, broken and alone, just like Disney and the creators wanted him, finds himself seeing history unfold before his very eyes. The famous siege of Syracuse he studied for decades. He meets Archimedes, the focal point of all those years of research. With nothing and no one to go back to, Indiana Jones wants to remain in this time. He pleads with Helena to leave him behind here, making it clear that this is what he wants.
Helena, get on the plane. I need to do this.
Me too.
And she knocks him unconscious and drags him back home. I don't like using this argument because it's overplayed, but imagine for a second how this scene would go over if you reversed the genders. If Helena had wanted to stay behind and Indy just cold-cocked her, the aftershock from the outrage would be felt for years. And of course from the shockwave of applause from those in the theater seeing this broad get decked. But I mean, this was building up to a powerful moment for the character. After 40 years of Indiana Jones and his adventures, it was turning into the moment where he finally hung up his whip and his hat. This broken character was finally taking control of a life that had gotten away from him, and he was going to go out on his terms in a place he loved. While it wouldn't have saved the movie, it would have at least saved the character, and we could put something of a bow on the whole franchise. But instead, Disney, LucasFilm, Kathleen Kennedy, and everyone else involved made it damn clear that Indiana Jones is theirs to do with as they please. Indiana Jones doesn't control his fate or his legacy. They're saying, if we want to do another cash grab of a movie, we'll just knock you out and have our way with you. We'll drag Harrison Ford's 90-year-old corpse out here, and if he says no, we'll just de-age him and do it ourselves. I haven't seen such blatant signals that the creators don't care about a franchise since The Last Jedi, and I've never seen it so plainly in one scene. Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones, and of course the actor isn't blameless in what this film did to the character. But when he goes, the franchise goes, and I can't help but wonder if down the road he'll look back and wish he had wrapped things up in this film instead of leaving it open-ended. Now, as for how people are taking this movie, well, it's not totally clear as of writing this. Reactions seem mixed, and ratings are still coming in from all over the place, and they haven't settled in a final range yet. But I think the majority of people will put this movie somewhere between a 4 and a 6 out of 10. In terms of the success of this movie, however, that rating is irrelevant. All that matters are the box office numbers, and as previously mentioned, those are looking pretty rough. So Lucasfilm and Disney better strap in for a bumpy ride. But was this a bad movie? Well, taken at face value and ignoring everything else surrounding the movie, we'd say the movie was exceedingly mediocre. But a $300 million movie only scoring a 4 or 5 is absolutely a relative failure. We say don't waste your time or your money on this one, and if you're a big fan of the series, we understand if you want to pretend this one didn't happen. With negative reviews pouring in from well before opening weekend, and people's growing disinterest in anything produced by Kathleen Kennedy and Disney, the box office numbers could be even worse than predicted when the actual figures start rolling in. And this is why a number of people are saying this may finally bring down Kathleen Kennedy, as her role as a producer is directly tied to funding and budgeting this film. And she let things run up to a completely unjustifiable level in terms of spending. Now, personally, we don't think this will change anything in the short term. Kathleen Kennedy's head has supposedly been on the chopping block every month for 5 years, and yet she remains. There have been multiple massive failures under her guidance, and yet she remains. So we don't expect something that's defied conventional logic for 5 years to suddenly work like you'd expect. As for Indiana Jones, it doesn't look like they're entirely done with the character or the franchise. And I can't get over the absolute gall to not just let Indiana Jones ride into the sunset on his own terms. It just feels like when they made Princess Leia Mary Poppins her way back into the story. Just let these characters go. But I know that's too much to ask for from a company as utterly soulless as Disney, who can find ways to monetize these characters for the next 100 years. But enough from me. I want to hear from you. If you saw it, what did you think of the Dial of Destiny? What words would you use to describe your complete disdain for this Helena character? If you haven't seen it, do you plan to? Do you care anymore about Indiana Jones, or has Disney's track record of ruining franchise totally turned you off from these kinds of movies? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, leave a like on the video, as it helps our videos reach more struggling fans out there. Also, click the subscribe button to stay tuned to HateWatchers for more reviews of other current shows and movies. Thanks for going on this adventure with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.